In the State of the Nation address last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa lauded the matric pass rate of 80% last year. However, there is renewed concern about the quality of education in South Africa, given the findings of the 2030 Reading Panel report. Let's bring up some of the very findings from this latest report. The number of grade 12 pupils who are not able to read in any language has increased to 82%. So in grade 4, those are 9 or 10-year-olds generally not being able to read. And with the current trajectory, South Africa needs 86 years to teach 95% of children reading for meaning, meaning they get something out of the reading. And of course, you have to read for meaning. The pandemic, the findings are that it's erased a decade of progress, and 50% of children in no-fee schools do not know any alphabet letters by grade 2. So, of course, that feeds into what happens in grade 4. We speak now to Professor Nick Spaull. He's Stellenbosch University's education economist, as well as Elinor Sisulu from Puku Children's Literature Foundation. Thank you. Let me start with you, Professor. Firstly, I'd like to link it to the matric results, because the president said we should celebrate those last night. Some, however, are saying, look, with the 30% pass rate, it's not good enough. Are you concerned, given these findings earlier on, because surely that suggests something is wrong? The kids don't just recover later in life.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yes, I agree with you. I think that using the matric results as the only indicator of progress is a big problem. There's also been a number of questions that have been asked about the matric results. There's been a 40% increase in the number of people taking matric since about 2018, 2019, and yet the way that the matric results are standardized hasn't changed. So I think there are questions about whether what we're talking about is the same thing before the pandemic and after the pandemic, now that many more students are reaching matric, but they aren't changing the way that those matric results are standardized. And as you mentioned, I think we need to take into account things like the international assessments of reading and mathematics that are showing big losses that happened as a result of school closures and rotational timetables that have set us back a decade. And I think that those need to be foregrounded and sort of the things that we're talking about rather than the matric results.
Yeah, and it makes you question what we've heard, that the kids have been so resilient, and we know certainly the private schools started reporting great results during COVID-19. But this suggests that the extent of the damage was huge, Prof.
Yes, most definitely. And you must remember that only 4-5% of children in South Africa attend private schools, what we call independent schools. So one of the studies that was done in no-fee schools shows that 10-year-olds in 2021 in South Africa know less than 9-year-olds in 2019 before the pandemic. So there's been a full year of learning that was lost for that cohort that was experiencing grade 1, 2, and 3 during the pandemic. So I don't think that we should be lauding the examples of people that had online learning, Zoom teachers, etc. That was not the case for at least 70 to 80% of learners in no-fee schools, where there was no learning that was happening while schools were closed.
Mr. Sulu, can you come in here? Where do you think things are going wrong? So we hear if you don't get the right stimulation when you're young, it is hard to recover. We're seeing by the time kids reach age 9 or 10, there's just been huge losses, I guess.
Yes, but before that, after watching that report from Turkey, I just want to say that for South Africans, Gift of the Givers is a wonderful organization, and that we can contribute. By contributing to the Gift of the Givers, at least we will have done our little something to ease the stress. And also to say that this is why reading is so important. When you have something like this happening, reading helps create empathy. It helps people understand what's happening in the world, and it helps people to cope with trauma. So I think it's really important, the figures that have come out about the reading. You know, people can debate. Since the panel met, I've had people confronting me saying, it's not as bad as that, people are just exaggerating. And my response to that is, it's not a good picture. I mean, we can quibble and say, okay, it's not 80%, it's 70, or it's 40, or it's 50. Whatever the case, the majority of our children are struggling to read, and we need to do something dramatic. We need to mobilize the nation to address the issues, to address the multiple issues that contribute, the systemic issues. And that's what we deliberated long and hard as a panel, and the next day also with the organizations in the reading ecosystem.
So while we have you, I mean, are there any good solutions out there right now? Because we had the education minister saying just a few days ago, we spend the lion's share of the budget on education. We're so committed to education that we do that. But obviously it's not yielding the results. There's just so many gaps in that spending and what comes out at the end.
Well, we had two presentations from Western Cape Education Department, Gauteng Department, and I think one of the areas of consensus was that you need to focus on the foundations. You need to focus on grade R, on grade 1, on the foundation phase, because a house has to be built on good foundations. You don't start building a house from the roof, you start from the foundations. And I think the education departments in those two provinces have done quite a lot of work in this area. It's also budgeting for reading programs. I mean, often there's good intentions and government has had good initiatives, but these have not been budgeted for. So I think we have to really work on the issue of making sure that we budget for reading. And that within that huge amount that's been spent, that one, it's been spent frugally, it's been spent wisely, and the other thing also was focusing on quality of teacher education, especially for early childhood.
Professor, coming back to you, so to continue with the findings, there is no current national reading plan, no national budget for reading. So taking what Mr. Sisulu just said, are there great interventions that if they were budgeted for, you really can turn things around, even at age 9, age 10, 11, etc.?
So I think yes, the answer is yes. There are examples of interventions that have been implemented in no-fee schools in rural provinces in South Africa and shown big improvements in reading outcomes where there are resources, where teachers are trained, where they're given proper equipment to teach reading, big books, storybooks, alphabet freezers, graded readers, etc. But even the department itself, you'll recall in 2011, there was a rollout of national DBE workbooks, and every single child in the country in South Africa receives those books. So it's not as if we have never had these sorts of interventions before. The problem at the moment, as you say, is that we do not have a national reading plan at the moment, completely missing in action. And the second one is that there's no budget. So if you don't have a plan and you don't have a budget, you're not going to have progress.
Would government say this is just part of education?
They would say that. They would say that we're spending the lion's share of the budget. We're spending more than 250 billion rand on education. And all of those things are true. But more than 80% of that is going to teacher salaries, as it is in most countries. And I think just spending more money on education and saying we're paying teachers more money or all of this money is going to schools and teaching and learning, we have to be asking why then are children not learning to read? If we're spending the right amount of money, perhaps that money needs to be spent differently. Perhaps we need to be spending it more efficiently. But I think the fact that we don't have a plan that says, for example, one of the recommendations of the reading panel was to say all classrooms need a minimum set of resources to all foundation-phase classrooms as a matter of urgency. You can't learn how to play soccer without a ball. You can't learn to read without books. And without the literacy resources that teachers need to teach reading and that they do not have in the vast majority of no-fee schools. Yeah. So I think the responses like that from the Department of Basic Education are shifting the blame away from themselves to say, what have you done? Where is the budget? Where is the plan?
Mr. Sisulu, you can come in there. I mean, has this been quantified? You said that the money has to be put forward. Do you know how much is needed ahead of our national budget speech, for example?
Well, I can't talk about how much is needed. I think the Economist must speak to that. But what I can say is that there was a National Reading Coalition meeting a few years ago, and a lot of hard work has been done within government. I think and one of the issues was that there must be a minimum set of reading materials in each and every classroom. I think government had committed to that, and we committed to the national goal of getting all children reading at age 10, reading for meaning by 2030. And this was stated in the President's 2019 SONA. So I think we're not at variance with government, but what we're saying is that it's just a matter of holding government to its own words and making sure that the good initiatives that are started are sustained. And for example, it's been a great thing that the DBE workbooks have been gone to all the schools in the country. And I think all aspects of the reading ecosystem, there are good initiatives, there are things that have worked, but those tend to be piecemeal. And I think the challenge is how to get them to be systemic. And I think probably the foundation where people really focused on was teacher education, that the quality of teacher education must be, there needs to be an audit of teacher education. Reading is like an elephant. There's many sides of the elephant. I'm one who would focus on content production and the quality of books that are being produced and how they are being produced and distributed. Others focus on the classroom, and certainly the classroom is the biggest area. But I think also for communities, there's the area of family and community literacy and building a culture of reading. These are all areas but whatever you look at, I think there's a tendency not to budget well for these things, whether it's government or whether it's reading organizations or literacy organizations. And I think that's something that we need to learn. We need to cost what is needed, and we need to make sure that budget is given to the work that must be done.
Yeah, this is just heartbreaking. So the number of grade 4 pupils who are not able to read in any language for meaning has increased to 82%. Thank you. That was Stellenbosch University Education Economist Professor Nick Spaull, Puku Children's Literature Foundation from there, Elinor Sisulu.